out who I'm not trying to talk about anybody specific, but there's churches that broadcast themselves as Bible-believing churches, but when you dig into their church community, you hardly see the Bible. And we do not want to become a church like that. We want to be directly tied to the Scriptures. So I'm going to challenge you, if that's not something you're maybe intimately familiar with, being part of the Scriptures, touching a Bible, a physical Bible, I challenge you, make that something that you dive deeply into in this coming year. Because the Scriptures will change your life. Jesus will work through His Word to bring change and to bring transformation to your heart. Amen. That's not what I was talking about this morning. We're going to talk about joy this morning. Amen. Amen. I hope that if you aren't regularly hearing testimonies that bring joy to your heart, that you would go and find some testimonies. Amen. Anybody have let's just be really Pentecostal here for a quick moment. Anybody have a testimony they'd like to share this morning? Anybody have a testimony? Oh, come on up. Come, please share. Come share. Yes. No. Oh, okay, we got 2 people standing up. Okay, all right. You want to come too, Lisa? Come on. We're early, so I still have 40 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. You got, all right. Oh, use the microphone.
For those of you that don't know Mike and I, he's been going through stage 4 cancer since 2019. And one of the medications he's on is Keytruda, which is immunotherapy. And the way I explain it, being a nurse, is that it makes your T cells Superman. Doctor doesn't understand why he's still with me. I said, well, God has a sense of humor because He likes to see us fuss at one another. Not to mention, when Mike has had his times, he wonders why he's still here, and he's got to see 2 more of our grandchildren, a total of 4, born. Well, every year, because my insurance has decided that he's received 2 years of Keytruda, no more will they pay for it, it's $9,000 a treatment. And so we've had to apply every year with Merck, the manufacturer, to get what they call, they pay for it, everything. We just go and he gets his treatment. Well, we just received our letter yesterday that up to December of next year, because again, every year we have to reapply, he's going to get his Keytruda at their expense.
Well, people that know me know that I have a twin sister that I am very fond of. And I'm even more fond of her husband. He's like the brother I never had. And he was diagnosed with brain cancer, the worst kind you can get, glioblastoma, almost 3 years ago. They told him he'd be dead in 6 months, and he's still with us. About 10 weeks ago, he fell and had a brain bleed. And so it stopped him from getting his Avastin, which is also an immunotherapy treatment. And so he had to go to the hospital for a couple of weeks, and then he came back home, and he had to go have an MRI before they wanted to do this treatment. Now, Steve wears an Optune device, which it keeps some of the cancer cells from reforming. So they did the MRI, and Linda and Steve went to the doctor for the follow-up, and the doctor walks in and looks at Steve, and he said, I just can't explain it. He said, your brain is healing amazingly without any treatments. And Linda said, well, we are a people of faith, and about 1 million people are praying for Steve. And he had not had any treatments in that 10 weeks. And so I'm just so thankful. Then at the end of the thing, they told my sister, they said, you know, the only explanation that could be is that his brain is forming antibodies against the cancer. So it's killing the cancer before it can even reform in his brain. Amen. And so I am just thankful to the Lord for all of His blessings. I mean, I know there's other people that have it worse than we do, but I'm just thankful. I need Amen. Steve.
Amen. Thank you so much for sharing that. The Lord is good. Amen. And we have a reason to be filled with joy. So I hope that those minister to your spirit this morning. Flip again to Matthew. Okay, come. Come and share on the microphone. I said we were going to get Pentecostal for a little bit. I may have meant a few minutes.
Good morning to everyone. I just want to say Pastor Phil and his wife came by and surprised me. And Pastor Phil, I thought about it. I wasn't ready for you guys. And I said, Jesus, I'm ready. Because he told us to be ready. And anyway, I just want to thank you. You don't see pastors coming around visiting people anymore. And it means so much to me. And my friend that lived further down, she said, I got a gift, and I don't know, somebody bought this gift with cookies and stuff. I said, oh, yeah, I know who he was. But anyway, I just want to say thank you, guys, because you don't see that anymore.
As someone in my generation, I'm so surrounded by people who have such a critical view of the church. And there are many areas where those criticisms are valid and rightfully deserved. But it is when you get into the body of Jesus, when you hear these stories, these testimonies, to see how faithful God is and how much good happens in the body of Jesus. Amen? Amen. I am encouraged this morning. Thank you so much for sharing. But this morning, the message is called Joyful Pagan Magicians. Okay, and if you want to jump on, I don't know if you already scanned the code or not, there are slides and there is a note packet there for all of you studious listeners. But let's jump into the text for this morning, starting in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Last week, we talked about Luke's account of Jesus being born, with the shepherds coming to rejoice with the angels. And this morning, we're going to talk about the magicians, the magi, the wise kings. And so Matthew records Jesus' birth, starting in verse 1, saying this. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, or magi, from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of the... when King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, so is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came over to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And after being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed a different way to their own country. This morning, my message is called Joyful Pagan Magicians. Because many of us, probably growing up, heard this story, and we were either told by song or by story that these people who come to see Jesus were wise men, were... I don't know, how else would you describe it? They're nobility, they're kings, and they're often depicted riding camels into Jerusalem with crowns and with jewels and all of these things. But more realistically, when you study the scriptures, when you study who these people probably were, the word there is actually magi, which in that time would have denoted a priest, a philosopher, a magician. Someone, and actually, I think there should be a slide here next. Flip over to the next one. I think there should be the next one there. Oh, never mind. I guess it didn't get added in. But these eastern men, they come from the east of Jerusalem, possibly Persia. Oh, yeah, here we go. Perfect. These eastern wise men, they were more likely astrologists, people who studied the stars, magicians, impressing people or finding prophecies to be fulfilled. It's recorded that apparently when Alexander the Great was born, there was supposedly this magical star that appeared the day he was born. So there's this mystical context of people who study the stars to find these fantastic or divine appointments. And so really these men who come to visit Jesus, we assume that there's 3 of them. The scriptures don't say that. There's either been debate whether there was 3 or 12, but we really don't need to know how many of these magi came. But we do know this, that these people in the story who come to worship Jesus, they were not righteous, zealous Jews. Rather, they were more than likely sinful pagan magicians. They were astrologists. They were court jesters. They were people who tried to weave these prophecies together in order for people to listen or pay them. And so instead of God utilizing these righteous men, these men and women in Israel, all of a sudden in Jerusalem, these joyful pagan astrologers, these magicians show up. And of all the people to have joy in the moment where God's Son becomes incarnate and dwells in the world, of all the people who should be celebrating, it's not the Jews who've been waiting centuries for their promised king. It's not the religious leaders who worship and pray in the temple. It's not the king who has been tasked with governing the very people of God. It's these magicians. They were pagan. They didn't hear directly from God. They followed a star. They didn't have access to worship God in the temple or in the Holy of Holies. They come from a far-off land. They had no claim to the blessings of Israel, for they were Gentiles. And they had no knowledge of the Christ. This is the context of our story that we so casually read over every year. It's these men who have no understanding of Jesus come from a far-off place in the east, joyfully ready to worship this coming king. So notice in the scriptures here, look at verse 3. Because they come to worship him, and when Herod the king hears this, he becomes distraught. Because these men, if you read the first few verses, it says they come to Jerusalem. Because the star comes and they see the star rise in the east. They come seeking the person. And the star supposedly at this point has never moved. The star only led them to the land of Israel. So where would you go to find this prophesied king? You'd go to the capital. So they show up at Herod's door in Jerusalem seeking after this king, and all of a sudden, the current king is distraught. Because if you know anything about history, you realize that when a new king happens to come up, whether that be by insurrection or any sort of government takeover, usually the previous king doesn't bode too well. Bad things usually happen to the king who has to step down. And more often, not just the king, but the family of the king. So when Herod hears this news, instead of being joyful, Herod, and not only Herod, but Herod and the people of Jerusalem are distressed. They're filled with grief. And the sad thing is, the people who should be filled with joy miss joy and are filled with fear.